for those of you that don't know, I quit drinking in 2019. Yeah, like St. Patty's Day 2019. So for like 5 years, I didn't drink alcohol or smoke weed or anything. Before that, I drank a lot. And it was, I don't know, it was really weird. Because they say that there's like two kinds of alcoholics, right? There's the kind that they have to drink every day. That was not me. I could go a day or two without drinking just fine. And then there's the kind that when they start drinking, they can't stop. And that was my vibe. That was where I was at. And it was weird because it wasn't like a problem until it was. And then when it became a problem, it became a very bad problem very quickly. Meaning that it only took like 3 or 4 beers for me to like black out and like not remember anything. And it started to really freak me out. I thought something was wrong with my brain. Those close to me would say that there still is, but I couldn't remember anything. And I'd wake up feeling like terrible, and I'd be like, what happened? And people would be like, oh, you had 4 beers, and then you had another 10 beers, and you went crazy. And I'm like, dude, I don't remember anything. And I think like some of those demons just kind of like started having their way with me, man, after like 4 beers. And so I was like, okay, this is wild. Let me try to really get a lid on this. And it was one of those things where I was like, I can have a beer or 2 and be fine. But like, it was like and the way I always describe it is it's like a tightening in your throat where like you have the one beer, but the one beer doesn't get you anywhere close to where you want to be. And you have like this tightening feeling in your throat. It's like a suffocation. And you're like, I have to have that second one. Then everything will be right with the world. So then you have the second one. And you have that same kind of tightening in the throat, like right here. And it's like, oh, if the second beer was so great that if I have one more, it's going to be double great. And the way that like addiction rationalizes in your mind is absurd. It's absolutely absurd. And I'm really lucky that like my teenage years into my early 20s, like I experimented with everything. I experimented with whatever drug I could. I've mentioned this before, like, all the drugs. And it was like, it was really wild because like when like doing hard drugs, you hear all these horror stories of like, Johnny smoked meth one time and then he's done. And I thought that was silly. And I thought, well, that's not me. And it was funny because to an effect, that was true. That wasn't me. When it came to doing hard drugs, they actually freaked me out. I never did too much. I never did them too often. I looked at experimenting as experimenting. And I never let it become part of my lifestyle in a way where, like, the second that things started to get dark because of experimenting with drugs, I turned around and I walked the other way and I said, I'm not going down that road. I'm not ending up like Uncle So-and-so, right? Which when you come from a family of a lot of drug use, it's very easy to see kind of where the path leads, down the line. So I was like, I'm not going to do that. But with alcohol, I was like helpless. I had to drink all the time in excess. And even if I didn't have to drink every day, I wasn't happy when I wasn't drinking. I was very unhappy. I was a grouchy, curmudgeonous man that I was just like, why the fuck can't I have a beer at Disney World? This sucks, And it was really hard. And I remember waking up one day and realizing how much damage I was doing to my brain. And I just stopped. I just stopped like cold turkey. I didn't go to AA meetings. I didn't talk to anybody about it. And I just stopped. I talked to my wife and that's it. And this is the first thing I want to talk about that I think is so important. I think this goes counter to a lot of advice. And I also think that this advice is really important when it comes to not just fighting the fight against addiction, but also trying to do entrepreneurial shit and grow a business and change yourself and do things that are important, that are going to make you feel good and positive, which is this: don't fucking tell anybody. Don't externalize it. Don't make it an expectation of others upon yourself, because the arbitrary weight that puts on your psyche is actually a shit ton, and you don't realize it. The second you tell someone, like, I'm getting sober, dude. Or the second you tell someone, like, I'm into knitting now and I got an Etsy shop. Like, the second you externalize it and put that out into the world, you feel like this really weird reverse pressure to like have to live up to some standard that is actually something that you created in the zeitgeist. It does, and you didn't have to. This is an internal struggle. It's a struggle of confidence and self-worth. And I'm a huge proponent that all drug abuse, not even abuse, but like just the everyday use of things like drug and alcohol is a coping mechanism, right? It's nothing as dramatic as like running away from like your past traumas. There's a little bit of that. There's no doubt about that. But it's very much a coping mechanism. And I know for me, like I'm a really huge introvert. I'm very awkward in social settings. I rely a lot on like comedy and being quiet. That's like the duotone of my personality in groups of people. I'm either very, very quiet, or if I hear like a good pun or a good joke opportunity, I'll take it, right? And that's it. I'm just not good around people. And so alcohol, used that a bunch. I had no social skills, and it really set me back. But when I decided to quit, right? And the first thing that I did when I decided to quit drinking was avoid social settings, especially those where drinking was involved. Number one, because I didn't want the temptation. But number two, I didn't really know to hang out with a bunch of people that I'm not super close to in a situation where I can't drink a beer sounded like hell on earth. It sounded terrible. And so it was like, just avoided it entirely. But you know what I realized actually pretty early on is that was the worst thing to do. Going into those situations and learning how to talk to people and learning how to listen and learning how to be present was the best medicine to quieting that voice in your head that says like, man, I really wish I had a beer right now. I wish if I don't have a beer, what the hell am I doing with my hands? I need a drink to hold, right? Like that's literally the voice that you have in your head. You can't, it's like you can't chill out when you get to the beach until you crack open the cooler and then crack open a drink. And now you're at the beach, right? You can't just like go and sit in a chair and be alone with your thoughts. God forbid. That was so much of my experience. The first, and you know what's wild about addiction is once you make it like 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, you're like, wow, good for me. I'm doing it. You slowly start integrating sobriety into your personality, where it becomes kind of a mark of pride, where I was avoiding telling people that I had quit drinking. And I started telling people like, I quit drinking. I'm good. I don't need to drink that. I'm not drinking anymore. I just want to get healthy. I just want to get healthy. I just want to be the best version of me. And I slowly started kind of assimilating that into my personality. And it was like after a year, it was really dangerous, because that voice that tells you need a drink, was becoming the voice of like, oh, you're good now. You're healthy now, bro. You got it under control. All those demons, bro, are behind you. Look how well you've done. You're in control now, right? And it's like, you really think to yourself like, yeah, I am in control. I haven't had a drink in a year. I could have one. And maybe you can, but you probably can't. And it was like, there was like these weird milestones where it was like, I had to I was fully convinced that I could totally have one beer, and I got really close, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. Because at the end of the day, I couldn't handle not remembering what the hell happened the night before one more time. One more time in my life would break me. It happened so many times. And it was like, I didn't want to do it. And that, shame is a great motivator. And so even though that voice was like, yeah, you could probably have a beer, the shame still stuck with me. It's like, dude, what if I have one beer and I tell myself I can have one more and that's all I have, but for some reason I can't remember after 2 beers now or something because I did irreversible damage. And so then a second year passed and a third year passed. And I started to become really okay with the thought of, this is who I am now. But I'll tell you another trick is I never, ever, ever, ever said, I'm never going to drink again. Even the thought of saying that I'm never going to drink again was too much pressure. It was too much pressure. It was too much to live up to. It's like an arbitrary thing that you don't need to fucking say. You don't need to put that out into the universe and be like, I'm never going to do X again. Or I always do this. Like to talk in these concrete terms feels like a huge weight on your back. Building false expectations that nobody's putting on you but you, then you don't need to. But I started to become okay with the idea that like I'm a guy who doesn't drink. And then right around probably like year 3, this weird thing started to happen where it was like all the progress I'd made and the social skills that I'd been building and the comfortability of being in public and around other people and doing things outside of my comfort zone while sober, all the progress that I'd made in that department really started to fail me. I started to feel even more of I started to feel like even more of an outsider than I felt before. I started, what was shame in me as like a motivating thing started to become like anger at myself for like being an addict. I started to be so angry at myself. Like, why the fuck? I'm going to this like nice steakhouse for like someone's birthday. Like, why can't I have a beer? Or like, oh, we're going on a trip with so-and-so and there's like going to be like a wine tasting and like, in this valley. And it's like, that sounds like a beautiful memory that I'd like to have. Like, why the fuck can't I have that? And I started to get like really angry at myself. And I feel like that anger like really started to like build up where I was just like, God, I hate the way that I was made. I hate who I fucking am on a cellular level. I hate the idea that like, even when I'm so out of the grips of like addiction, I'm still so fucking not. And that was like a really hard thing. To the point where I was like, I tell you the thing that broke me was it was like not God, the excuses your brain makes is so fucking stupid. Like when my kid was born, right? Like me, my stepdad, my father-in-law, we all went back out on the patio and had like these like cigars, right? And it was like a celebration, right? And it just felt incomplete. That's the word. That's the absolute word, is incomplete. There are certain things that I would go do, and memories I would make, and the needing to have a beer went away. Like I didn't feel like I needed to have a drink, right? But it started to feel like this memory of me fully engaging with it was incomplete because I wasn't doing it. And it really started to make me feel just shitty, just generally bad. And that was like the 3rd year. And I think the 3rd year was the hardest year. And then I got to year 4. And I was like, doing well. I was doing well in life. I was doing well creatively. I had a lot going for me. But the stress and pressure of other things going on in my life, I know what you think I'm going to say. You think I'm going to say it made me want to drink. But no, that's not what I'm going to say. I'm going to say I was really proud of myself, how my first instinct to things was suddenly becoming not that I need a drink, or I don't need to cope with this, or I don't need anything to distract me from it. I was totally okay just sitting there in my thoughts and emotions and dealing with them. And the drink wasn't my first, second, or third thought. It kind of maybe was my fifth or sixth. Like, man, you know what really helped me relax after a stressful day? Yeah. So what's the ending of this story? Of this story of Taylor's sobriety? Well, I'll tell you. In year 4, I started a buddy of mine, Damon. I don't know if I should say his name. Sorry, I shouldn't have, but fuck you, Damon. No, I'm just kidding. A buddy of mine was like, hey man, have you heard of this BetterHelp thing? It's like a therapy thing. And I was like, yeah, I've heard of it. I've seen it, on YouTube videos. And he was like, you should do it. And for those of you that don't know what BetterHelp is, it's a one-on-one therapy, streamlined therapy session that is all through an app. It's all through a platform. So you literally download the app, you put on your information, you tell them what kind of person you want to talk to, what you want to talk to them about, and then they go into their database of talk therapists to find someone who's uniquely qualified to talk to you about your situation, and you're able to give them some parameters about kind of, would you like that person to be a man or a woman or older or younger or whatever, so that way you're talking to someone that you feel comfortable with. And it was really great. And I had originally started doing talk therapy for, as you get older and you have a kid, you start gaining a lot of perspective on like your own childhood and shit that fucked you up. And you're like, man, I should probably talk to someone about this. And it was really great. It was really positive and awesome. And I really, really appreciate Jax, the guy that I talked to, who's fantastic. He really made me think about things in kind of a different way. And I realized I was actually pretty terrible at processing a lot of the stuff that had happened to me. I was going through kind of a weird emotional thing from something that happened, but with a friend of mine. But where this all leads is I began talking with my wife and my therapist about maybe I'm ready to try drinking again. And part of the reason was because, like, my wife, God bless her, she's a saint. She's an absolute saint. She was like there with me in she was there with me in spirit, right? Like, I wasn't drinking, so she really wasn't drinking. And I always thought that was really unfair to her. And sometimes she would ask me, which feels terrible. Like, when you're like the person that's like sober, it feels so bad when someone looks at you like, is it okay if I have a drink? Is it gonna bother you? It's like, no, just have it. The fact that you're asking me makes me feel terrible. But she would ask, and she'd be like, hey, is it cool? And I'd be like, yeah, of course. But I knew that, like, she felt kind of guilty, like, drinking around me. And there was just all this stuff, right? And I thought inside, personally, that I had grown as a person a lot. And I thought to myself, hey, dude, you're 34. You are not the same person you were when you were 26, having all those fucking issues. You've grown a lot. You've done a lot. You've changed a lot. I think you can handle it. I think you can handle your shit. And I started to have this conversation with my wife and my therapist. And my wife was like really supportive. She was like, yeah. She's like, I think that you totally could. And I think that you've already proven that you have the skills to where, if you try to dip a toe back into the pool and you feel yourself needing to jump in the deep end, you have the tools and the skills now to be able to recognize that and pull yourself out again. Right. And so, and my therapist was like, it gave me some really good words of encouragement, because he was like, I've talked to people that have quit drinking in the past. They quit for many years. they started drinking again, and it went off the fucking rails. Like going back in a time machine, right back to who they were, making the same mistakes. And I was like, my God, that sounds crazy. I can't do that. I have a kid now. There's no way that I can be like, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's obscene. But he was like, actually, there's a lot of people who quit for a long time and who reintroduce, you know, cocktails or, you know, casual drinking back into their life, and it's fine. It's fine. And so after like many months of just kind of talking about it here and there, we weren't putting any pressure on it. It wasn't like a thing. I decided I was going to try. And I did. And I had my first beer at a restaurant in 5 years. And one beer made me feel pretty loopy. And it was pretty awesome. And it was one of those things where I didn't realize how I had integrated this idea of sobriety into my personality and my identity so heavily that when I had a first, that was the main thing. I had to make sure, the reason why it took months and months and months is I had to make sure that if I made that decision, that this pillar of my identity that I had been hanging my hat on for the last 5 years, when I demolished it from a single sip, that I wasn't going to regret it, that I was okay with it. And then I realized why I was doing it, which was to feel normal. I was tired of labeling myself as a fucking addict. I was tired of being like, oh, I can't have that. I have a problem. And I was just like, you know what? I don't even know that I have a fucking problem anymore. It's been like 5 years. I might not have a problem. I might be okay. And a lot of people will tell you like, that's the addiction talking. And it's like, fuck those people, dude. I am my own human being. I'm a full-grown man. I can make my own decisions. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to make sure that I'm okay. And long story short, It was awesome. I can drink casually now around people. I can have a beer or two and feel totally fine and in control. And that was, let's see, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. So that was 7 months ago. I've never even come close to skirting up against an issue. It's been great. It's been awesome. Me and my wife have had like awesome times. And yeah, I guess I've just been thinking a lot about that whole thing, like about hating myself and feeling the shame and needing to quit and then almost relapsing and stopping and having to kind of relearn social skills and all that. And, you know, the only other thing I've really been like addicted to in my life was painkillers, like Vicodin and like Percocet, which, you know, back in my day were great. You could take Vicodin and Percocet and you could get hooked on them just as awesome as anybody else. And then you could be like, whoa, that's a little crazy. I got to pump the brakes. Pharmaceuticals, not good. Now you fucking die. Like now you can't fuck around with cocaine or with heroin or with meth or with pills. Not that you should, but like it's they tried to scare you like back in like the 80s, 90s, like try it one time and you'll die, which was like not that true. Like you could do a line of cocaine and be generally okay. Now you probably will fucking die because it's probably all cut with fentanyl and that's it. You're dead. There's no more drug experimentation. There's no more like putting yourself into altered states of consciousness in a safe, well-regulated way amongst people that you trust and love. No, now it's just do fentanyl in a bathroom and die. And this is America. Welcome. You're welcome. So, I don't know where I was going with that, but I could rant about how much I hate the pharmaceutical industry and fentanyl. But that's probably like a video series all unto itself. So yeah, what I wanted to say, and the reason I wanted to make this video is because you hear a lot of people talking about sobriety and they're like, I'm sober, I'm doing good. And I'm like, good for you, dude. And you're like, I'm never going to drink again. And people feel like if they jump back into it, they got to go from 0 to 60. They got to jump back in the deep end. It's going to be a full relapse. They're going to be like crashing their car. And it's like, you know what, dude? Sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes if you've really taken the time to build the necessary skills as someone who doesn't use drugs or alcohol now, when you dip a toe back in, sometimes you're just soaking your feet and you don't feel the need to jump in the deep end. And all those things that were kind of haunting you, that you were running from, sometimes you did it. You beat them. Well done. You know, there's a lot of people that feel like they hate. It's so interesting. There's a lot of people that feel like they really hate the version of themselves that they were when they were using and abusing. And I think the thing that really allowed me to quit cold turkey and do it on my own and not really have an issue was I totally did not reject that person or those actions or me. I accepted it. I said, I am that person. I did those things. Something is wrong with me. I'm doing this for me. This is a me decision. I didn't do it for anybody else. I did it for me. I had to figure out who I was when I wasn't using drugs or alcohol. And I might not have liked that person to begin with, but then I had to do the work and I had to say like, well, now that person that you are when you're not using drugs and alcohol, now you have to make that someone likable. Now you have to make that someone that you can look in the mirror and be proud of. So what are you going to do about it? And then you figure it out. You figure it out, man. You know, I remember when I was trying to quit, the transition between like quitting smoking cigarettes and vaping. You know, a lot of people that don't smoke, they go like, same thing. It's not the fucking same thing. You know, everyone's so quick to like shit on other people and like what they're going through. And it's really the one thing that bothers me more than anything else, dude. Is just like people that kind of judge how other people are living or what they're going through. And it's like, bro, you don't have a fucking clue why that lady's crying in the grocery store. You don't have a clue what's going on with people, dude. They each have their own lives that are sophisticated with depth and obstacles and dreams and goals. And it's like, people are so quick to give advice about, you should get sober, dude. You should sober up. And it's like, yeah, if it was that easy, you know, all the problems would be fixed. It's actually one of the most difficult things on the fucking planet if you are heavily addicted to a thing, and then to get clean and remain clean. But I really think that's only half the battle, which is why I wanted to make this video, because I think the other half of that battle is accepting yourself, forgiving yourself, not putting too much pressure on this sober identity that you build up. Because some people relapse and they're like, well, fuck it, I've relapsed. Now I'm going to go full bore and be in jail tomorrow. And it's like, dude, you don't have to do that. You can be different than who you were. You can be a different person now. You can be a person that drinks, right? Or, you know, smokes weed and doesn't lose their fucking mind. It's like this, people think they're running from that person. If that person catches up, that's who they are now. And I don't buy it. I don't buy it. So what does this have to do with creativity, entrepreneurship? A lot. Because you have to be able. So many people don't take that first step, dude. So many people just can't think of themselves as creative or, you know, brave. Because you got to be really brave if you want to do entrepreneurship. You got to take risks. You got to take risks. And it's like that first step is the one that is the hardest for people to take. And with addiction, that it's kind of the same way. That first step of saying like, I'm going to get sober, and then actually doing it, most people fail in like 30 to 60 days for a reason. You know, everyone's done that. Everyone's done that in January. They've been like, I'm going to get in shape, and they go get a gym membership, and they go for a month or two, and then they stop. That's the That's the timeline of someone trying to make a decision to better themselves and then letting the ghost of who they were catch up to them rather than leaving it behind, or accepting that we're all changing together and that's not a separate entity, you know. And it's so hard, I think, socially. Well, that's one of the things too, is socially the way that people judge you and look at you when you tell someone like I'm starting my own business, I'm starting my own thing, I'm doing my own thing, they kind of judge you in the same way when you're like, well, I can't have a drink because I'm an addict. It's kind of, both those things make you feel like other people's judgment against you is just like so unwarranted. You know, it makes you feel weird, and I don't think that's cool or right. Anyway, I've never really talked about any of these experiences openly in a video format, so yeah, hopefully it's good. Hopefully you like it. I don't know. I'm just being me. All right? All right, peace.